Hello, welcome, and thank you for joining me for another of Pu Songling's Strange Tales from a Chinese Studio, which I'm reading one per day until I get bored or forget. Today we have story number 15, The Monk of Changqing. At Changqing there lived a monk of great spiritual attainment and virtue. He was over 80 years old, but still hale and hearty. Then, one day, he fell to the ground and was unable to rise. The other monks came hurrying to his aid, but found him already lifeless. He had entered the state of nirvana. His soul, meanwhile, unaware of his death, had gone drifting off to the south, to a place somewhere in the region of Henan province. The son of a noble Henan family was out there that very same day, with 10 or so of his retainers, hunting hares with falcons, when his horse bolted and the young man was thrown to the ground and instantly killed. The wandering soul of the old monk from Changqing happened to be passing close by, and in that very instant entered into his body. The young man gradually began to show signs of recovering consciousness. His retainers gathered round him and inquired how he was. "What am I doing here?" he asked, opening his eyes. They lifted him up and helped him home, where his womenfolk in their many-colored silks greeted him and inquired after his well-being. "But I am a monk," he exclaimed in amazement. "What am I doing here?" His family thought he must have taken leave of his senses, and tried tweaking his ears to bring him round. The monk himself was quite unable to understand his own predicament, but resolved to close his eyes and say nothing further. At mealtime he would eat nothing but coarse rice, and refused to touch meat and wine. At night he slept alone, rejecting the attentions of his wife and concubines. After a few days he felt a sudden urge to go out for a stroll, to the delight of his family. The moment he stepped out of his room, the stewards thronged around him, with ledgers and accounts to be checked, but he told them he was still not feeling well and sent them all away. "Do you know the village of Shangqing in Shandong province?" he asked one of his household, who replied that he did. "I feel so cooped up and bored here," he said. "I should like to go to Changqing and take a look around. Have my things made ready at once." They all protested that he was only just on the mend, and that such a long journey seemed inadvisable. But he refused to heed their advice, and set off the very next day, arriving at Changqing to find everything exactly as he remembered it. He made his way straight to the monastery, without needing to ask the way. When the junior monks, his erstwhile disciples, saw this young nobleman arrive, they greeted him respectfully. "Where is your master?" he asked them. "He was transformed some time ago," they replied. He asked to see where they had buried him, and they took him to an isolated gravesite, the tomb itself some 3 feet high, the soil around it still bare, the grass having not yet had time to grow back. The monks were still trying to fathom the purpose of this young nobleman's visit, when he sent for his horse and set off home again, instructing them as he left, "Your master was a monk of virtue. Guard with care whatever relics you have of his. Let no harm come to them." They promised to do as he said, and he went on his way. On his return home, from that day onwards he sat in a bemused state, refusing to take the slightest part in family affairs. Several months went by like this, until finally one day he upped and left again, heading straight back to Changqing and his old monastery. "I am your master," he announced to his former disciples. This time they all thought he was raving, and looked at one another and laughed. But then he started telling them of how his soul had found a new body, and recounted in precise detail a number of events in his life as a monk, all of which tallied exactly with what they knew of their master. They were obliged to believe him. He slept once more in his old bed, and they waited on him as they had done before. The young nobleman's family came several times, with a great cortege of carriages and horses, and pleaded with him to go home with them. But he turned a deaf ear to their entreaties. More than a year later, his wife sent a household steward with rich gifts of gold and silk, all of which he refused, except for a single plain cotton robe which he kept for his own use. From time to time his friends from Henan province would call on him if they were in the neighborhood. They found a man of quiet dignity and sincerity, barely 30 years old, but with the wisdom of a man 50 years his senior.